Hello, everybody. I'm here today with Josh. Hi, Josh.
Hi Debbie, how's it going?
So I'm with Josh Denny. We're going to do our second show on Q&A. People very kindly sent us questions for us to ponder whether we'll answer them or not. I don't know. But I was going to start with a little reading from Ouspensky's Fourth Way. And Ouspensky's book, The Fourth Way, is Q&A. So someone's asking Ouspensky, how can we make this work more real? I realize that it is not what it might be. And the answer is, from Ouspensky, it is what it is because you are not what you might be. There is a certain principle in the work. Time is counted. For every person, certain demands are made. If you've only been 1 month in the work, the demands are small. Next month they grow. After 6 months, they are bigger. After a year, still bigger. If a person does not meet these demands, the bill becomes very heavy in the end. If someone considers that he has the right to be on the level of the first month, after being in the work for some years, he cannot pay the bill. Payment means, first of all, being able to meet demands. Demands always grow. And if you are behind your time, things will look below their right level to you, whatever they are in reality, because you are below level. But if you work, if you grow, you will be on the level of the demands. I'm showing you the side from which it is possible to approach this question. Many things are necessary in an organization, understanding first of all, and effort. So I just wanted to do that little quote because, obviously we're all trying to work, we're all having our demands, we're all trying to get to certain levels and follow the ladder up. Because if I remember rightly, Gurdjieff says we'll go up the ladder and there should always be someone behind us.
Yeah, like I think he says, isn't it? I think he says something like you can't, progress, say up to the next stage unless you bring somebody up to. I think even maybe he says more than one people. I can't remember. You might say like 5, 10 people, something like that. Unless you bring a number of people up to the stage that you were at. So again, it's just that kind of idea that there needs to be people on all the rungs because like everybody helps each other. There's like an interaction and exchange between those different levels and people at different levels, and so they kind of need each other. And I think Ouspensky mentions in I think it's in Search for the Miraculous, like he says, I think like it's not long after he started attending the groups with Gurdjieff, and I think at the start Gurdjieff says like don't. I think he almost says like don't tell anybody about what you're doing in the groups and the ideas, kind of keep it to yourself for a while. And then after a while, I think he says like now you've been in it, for a decent amount of time, that I think you'll be able to talk to someone about the work in a kind of a fairly clear manner that won't be too, you won't distort it too much. And also, I think Ouspensky begins kind of like, you could say teaching, like again, he serves as like a step down between Gurdjieff and other people, introducing them to the ideas. So he starts kind of teaching or talking to people about the ideas. And I think he finds that was one of the ways he found to learn was by like trying to, you could say, teach another person or talk to another person, and questions might come up that he kind of realized that maybe he didn't have an answer for, or something that he was, unclear on. And so it kind of gave him, an opportunity to readdress, reevaluate his understanding. And often new insights would come in that context of like, like say a teacher and a pupil. So yeah, I think he does say that, yeah, like what you, how you perceive the work and what you'll get out of it will be dependent on, like you could say, the level that you're at or where you're coming from. And I think again, like in the groups, like the way Gurdjieff talks about it at the Priory and stuff in the Institute, like he says there's like exoteric and mesoteric and kind of like esoteric groups, or that the schools split into those groups, and that obviously it takes work to move from one group, from the exoteric to the mesoteric to the esoteric. It takes work to do that, and they kind of correspond to, you could say, like transformations, or like he was saying that they correspond to being able to fulfill certain, you could say, obligations or demands, or just to be able to do certain things, certain kinds of work, and that you've developed a certain understanding. Like, like I suppose Gurdjieff would say you're in the exoteric kind of part of the school, and for some reason or other, yeah, you like just decided to go to the esoteric kind of part of the school or the classes for that group, then probably, yeah, you wouldn't really be able to get much of benefit out of it, because you haven't kind of gone through the steps that enable you to kind of, you could say, understand what they're talking about, or like bring it into your life, bring it into your actions and your practical kind of understanding, So yeah, it makes the work in that sense look like very communal, that you are dependent on your relations with other people. Like, you need to be taught, and you also kind of need to teach. There needs to be that kind of free flow and exchange.
Yeah, I find that quite interesting when people come and ask me about the work, and they always ask me questions about bits of the work that I don't actually understand, normally the cosmology, right, and things like that.
Yeah.
It's like, what? I can talk about other things, but not that. So it's
yeah.
like I'm being tested all the time. That's like Gurdjieff's reminded me through other people of the bits that I'm weak on.
yeah, exactly. Well, that's another way they can throw up questions, or just other like viewpoints that you might not have considered. So that's why obviously it's great to talk to other people who are involved in the work or other teachings, just so you can get an exchange of ideas and different views of opinion, different takes than you might have considered. Or like you say, it'll make obvious, at least it'll make it clear to you which parts of it you kind of feel more comfortable with, than others.
Yeah, and I always put the offer out there to people. If anybody wants to do shows with me, I know I do shows with Josh and Tony and a few other people, but if anybody else ever wants to do one, do get in touch. More happy to chat with people. So, and I'm sure Josh is as well. Let's get a dialogue going.
Yeah, I often do. It's great just to, just to hear other people's take on it, on their experiences. I find that fascinating, really.
Well, maybe we have to do a call out on that one next time, and then we can perhaps get something going like that. I'll think about that one, of how we could do it. But we got quite a few questions, and I'm going to start with one from Salam Majar, and I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. And he asks, what are the keys to truly unlocking Beelzebub's towers? And I would say the first thing, obviously, is to read the book. Many people come to me that haven't read the book. They've read books about the books, or they followed shows like mine or other people's that tell them a little gist of what the book's about. But it's really important to read Beelzebub's Tales. And Gurdjieff even says in his advice at the beginning, you need to read it 3 times. Once like a newspaper, second time as if you're reading it to somebody else, because that's quite important to do. When you're reading to somebody else, you're paying more attention to what's being said so that you get it right when you're saying it to someone. And then the third time is to fathom the gist. So what have you got to say about what are the keys in truly unlocking Beelzebub's towers, Josh?
Yeah. Well, like you say, obviously, putting the time in, I suppose, reading it, that's, it seemed like the minimum requirement. I mean, you might be able to understand certain things, like you're saying, through reading other people's books about it, or, seeing their ideas on it. And you can get things out of that. But obviously, if you haven't read the kind of source material, then it's probably going to limit what you can get out from, of other people's materials. So yeah, obviously you'll need to put the time in, I suppose, to read it. And like, definitely like what he says, like, read it at least kind of 3 times, in those 3 different ways. So like, I think that in a way, I think that's a kind of a strange piece of advice, the way he puts it, saying that, you'll need to read my works 3 times. And like, particularly that advice about reading them in 3 different ways, it's kind of seems fairly unusual. People like reading it as if either reading it aloud to someone, or I think he even says reading it as if you were reading it aloud to someone. If if there's not somebody there, then you could read it aloud in the room, or you could even just pretend like when you were reading it as if you were reading it to someone else.
Yeah, he does say that, as if you were reading it to somebody else. You don't need an audience, but you just read it aloud.
Yeah, either way, you could read to another person directly, or just like, you could say pretend. But it's like, it just seems a strange piece of advice in that sense, that he's getting you to experiment with how you're reading it, like the kind of context around it. Like, obviously, that, like, if there's somebody else in the room and I'm, and I like you're saying, and I read the tales to them, immediately I'm in a different kind of position. The context is very different. So that's, because the context is different, that's going to bound to have an effect on how I read. Like, maybe I'll read it slower, or with more pauses, or maybe I'll put different inflections, in the words and stuff, and I'll probably just feel a bit different because there's somebody else, in the room. So I think that's important. What he's kind of suggesting there is to experiment with, like, you could say, different ways of reading, like different contexts of reading, because even like a subtle change in the context, whether you're reading it to yourself or whether you're reading it to another person, like that change in the context will have some kind of change in your experience, and that change in your experience might enable you to get new insight. because like, so I think in a way he's trying to get us to find ways of working against our kind of like habitual nature, you know, like he's always going on about us being machines and like, you know, automaton, and so we tend to like do anything mechanically, whether it's reading or anything else. So you know, again, I think he's advertising trying to find interrupt like habitual way of reading, you know. So like say reading it to someone else is doing something different to just reading it in my normal fashion. And the same with like really trying to fathom the gist, you know. I suppose you could say that that's how we would kind of think we tend to read anyway, that we read something and we kind of think we're trying to work it out. But yeah, I suppose he makes that differentiation by saying just at the start, just read it like you'd read a normal newspaper. I mean, it's very difficult to read it like a normal newspaper, just because like the nature of the words in it, like, you know, you don't know what they are, some of the made up words, and some of the sentences go on for ages. So it's kind of hard to read it like you would just read a normal newspaper. But I suppose he's just saying, you know, for your first time, just, you know, just read it. Don't be worried too much about, you know, the funny words or the long sentences, or if you're if you're finding yourself getting confused. That's, you know, that's probably the way it should be, you know. So don't fuss over that too much, you know. Maybe like someone could pick it up and they could just get frustrated with it and just put it down, you know what I mean, because they didn't feel that they were getting anything out of it, or maybe they didn't feel confident in dealing with those words or ideas, you know. But I think, yeah, maybe saying just read it regardless. And I suppose there is that idea again that people have mentioned. I think he mentions it himself, that he's tried to write the book in a way that it'll act on your subconscious, you know. So like, again, it suggests that what he's after or intends for you through the book is not just like, it's not what we normally would kind of conceive of, just reading the book and then coming to some kind of like mental understanding of it, you know. I think what he's after is something deeper than that, something that it's not just becomes like a mental understanding for you, but something that changes you could say your very being, you know, something that enters your subconscious and kind of like, you could say almost works on you, like a living influence. So yeah, that's a basic thing I would suggest, just trying to find different ways of reading it, like different ways of engaging with the material. Or
that is one of the major keys, I would have thought, as well, of trying to tell yourself, because nobody told me, think of when you're reading it, try and read it in a different way to, I know he says it in the advice, but you know, you don't always take in what's being read. Of, you know, you've got to try and bring your subconscious up to read it. And once I started doing that, then I did start understanding it more. It's really difficult to say and put it into words. But also when you start looking at it like that, and then you start reading other of his works or talking with other people about the books, and you start learning about all his different ideas of the laws, you can start seeing how it all, because he explains it all in Beelzebub's Tales, but it's quite difficult. The more you read it, the more it begins to make sense. It's one of them kind of books, you know. You read it a second time, it's like, oh yeah, that's a bit easier, and then the third time even easier still, and then something new comes up, as in any book that you would read. When you give it a reread, it's like, oh, I don't remember that from last time.
Yeah, definitely. And like you say, I suppose like reading it multiple times spread out over, you know, the course of a few years or something, like reading it and leaving it and then returning to it again, you know, like say in that process that you know, if you return to it, you'll probably discover new things, because like say in the course of the time that's passed since you last read it, you've maybe been exposed to new ideas or had some new experiences. So it kind of gives you like, you could say, like a potential into another, you know, another angle or another meaning that could be in the material. You know, like you're saying, you might come to see another layer of meaning there that you didn't see before, just because you hadn't had the ideas or some kind of experience, you know. So yeah, like finding different ways to read it, and also just finding different ways to kind of like ponder, contemplate on the ideas in the book, you know, finding different ways to think about it, you know. Like I think that was again a big idea for him, trying to find different ways that we can work with ideas, like not just through like a typical notion of trying to think about them, you know. Like you could try to contemplate an idea through your body, you know. You could like, you know, do some dancing or something, or some poses, you know. You could bring those what appear to be very theoretical or mental questions. Maybe you've got a question about the octave or something, or the law of seven, and obviously, yeah, you can sit there and ponder about it and read other people's material, and that's one way to, you know, possibly get an insight. But you could also, like, you know, paint a picture or something, or write a poem, or, you know, like, yeah, do some embodiment, you know, some gestures or some movement, just as another way to work on those kind of questions. Like you like you're using your other brains, like in his terminology, the three brains, or your other centers, like your mind, your body, and your feelings. You're trying to ponder on the ideas or the material with each of your centers, you know, trying to find a way to work on it through my emotions or through my body or through my mind. So yeah, that, you know, that'd be another suggestion, not only reading the book different ways, but finding different ways to ponder, contemplate the ideas or the questions, you know. And like I think he, yeah, I think he does. I think he does say. I think I can't remember again where it is. It's somewhere, somebody's book. There's a, like, you know, a recorded chat with him and someone. I think someone's asking him about Beelzebub's tales, like maybe saying something that they're struggling to read it, or, you know, get what he's talking about. And I think he kind of says to them that you need to read it with a different attention. You know, you kind of need to read it in a different way that, again, that we're habitually accustomed to read with our habitual attention. We need a different kind of form of attention that if we bring it to the book, we'll, like he says, you'll get much more out of it. So then obviously, yeah, there's the question of what that kind of, like, you could say, attention is like. And again, he says that, like, in the book, there's everything in the book. You know, everything, every question that a man could possibly ever ask is answered in this book. And he says there's even, like, you know, a recipe for cooking an omelette. But he says there's obviously, there's no explicit mention of how to cook an omelette. So again, you could say he's suggesting that the basic kind of like principles, you know, you could say basic wisdom is embedded in the book. That if you get in touch with that, then it'll be applicable to almost any area in your life, whether it's cooking, you know, an omelette or, you know, going to the shops, you know.
Because when he used to do the readings in his, well, not in his class, in his in the flat, wasn't it, in France, people used to come and read, and he used to watch who was paying attention, didn't he? And he could tell who was taking it in and who wasn't. And that was the whole point of people coming for the readings. But they never went and dissected the chapter afterwards or anything. But I suppose they were also all lucky enough to have come perhaps to his talks, where his talks would have perhaps given them a bit of a background into all his laws that he was talking about, and you know, all the different scenarios and things. So I recommend to a lot of people also, when you're reading Beelzebub's Tales, or you've read it once or whatever, then go and look for these other books about people that were there with him, his actual lectures where he's talking. Not necessarily does he talk about Beelzebub's Tales or Bennett's book on Beelzebub's Tales. He was there when Beelzebub's Tales was being read, J.G. Bennett. You know, these people will all help you find more understanding of the book. Okay, it's reading other people's books, but it will help you when you're reading the book. Sorry. Yeah,
well, I suppose like what you were saying, particularly people who spent time with him, you know, some of those first-hand accounts like Fritz Peters and the De Hartmans, you know, and so any of those kind of memoirs, again, like you're saying, they can be very useful because they can give you, like, they might talk about the ideas and recounts Gurdjieff said this, Gurdjieff said that, but they also give you the impressions that the people had to Gurdjieff, you know, their personal kind of, you know, the impression that he made on them, which could be very valuable, like get a personal insight into Gurdjieff that then you can kind of use to give you an insight into his ideas, or it gives you a kind of a context that'll, you know, can give you some different ways of looking into it, you know, because like if you know something about some of his life story, again, say some of the bits that he recounts himself, like in Life is Real, Only Then When I Am, or like, you know, the episodes that say the De Hartmans and things call, then you'll probably see some of those episodes reflected in, say, Beelzebub's Tales or like Meetings with Remarkable Men. You'll maybe see that he's talking about some of these things that happened in his life, but he's using, you know, a kind of a mythic or metaphorical sort of language, you know. So if you've got some knowledge of, you know, at least what other people recount of his life or what he recounts of it, then it'll give you some possible ways to understand what he's talking about, you know, or just give you a bit of a sense of maybe him as a person or his essence, you know, his kind of particular characteristics, which then might, then it'll feed back into like seeing kind of where he's coming from in his writing or his kind of particular style, you know. But I was going to say with like pondering, using the book, and you know, you can use it as a kind of an exercise in like mentation, you know, what he calls mentation. You could take the word to mean thinking, or kind of thinking with your three centers, you know, thinking with your body and your thoughts and your feelings. So you could use it as a way to try to like exercise your mind and or your meditation, and particularly like meditation, what he calls meditation by form. Like in Beelzebub's Tales, he says that we've got these two kinds of thinking, two kinds of meditation, one by sort of words and one by form. And part of one aspect of meditation by form could be like what you could take to be like thinking in pictures, or you could say like analogy or metaphor, or through the use of a story or something. And so trying to get in touch with the kind of side of your mind that deals with that deals with myth and like storytelling and fairy tales, that kind of side of yourself, So you can use it as an exercise to, again, just use it as an opportunity to confront, my own understanding, my own ideas, and trying to use it as an exercise in meditation by form. Like if he's talking about, say some episode in Beelzebub's Tales, then again, you can really try to use your visualization to invest that into the text, so you're not just kind of just reading it in a kind of dry way. If you kind of invest some of your imagination into it, if you like, then it's probably going to be able to move you more. At least it'll bring your feelings into it rather than just kind of more of a dry analytical. So I think you can use it as like an exploration into like meditation by form, or like thinking in pictures. So I suggest that's another way of working with it. Like pick an idea, or just make a very conscious effort when you're reading a passage to just try and create a very vivid visualization. Try and see clearly in your mind this situation. Maybe there's Beelzebub and Hussein talking in the spaceship. So just like try to use your own your own imagination to feed that. In which case you might see something more out of it.
And this is really important, actually, because I know Gurdjieff says a lot that we've got to try and stop imagination, and Spencer says this, but Gurdjieff also says we have to save our imagination for important work. And this is the kind of important work I think he meant. Doing exactly what you're saying, imagining, obviously, all and everything, the characters from the book playing out in your mind. Also, we need to use our imagination for when we're working on ourselves, when you're saying your prayers to your gods or whatever, or to your angels, you've got to imagine what you really need. And one of these questions is about prayer, so we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah, and like I suppose, like you said, it gives you the opportunity there to try to, like when you're reading, to try to see yourself reading. Again, like self-observation. Try to observe yourself. Like say you're reading a passage that you find, intellectually quite difficult. Like what's he talking about? I'm struggling to follow it. Then again, that's a great opportunity to try to watch your own mentation, your own thinking process, like in action. Like observe how you're reading the sentence and what maybe automatically comes up in terms of a suggestion of what it means, and then like using that as an opportunity to see your own understanding, or to possibly go further in terms of like what words mean to you. Because I think it's at the start of the book in Beelzebub, doesn't he say something about like being able to intone or vocalize a word properly? Like, doesn't he says something like at the start, I don't know if it's where he gives like, says that prayer, at the beginning
advice.
Is it his friendly advice? Something in that, where he talks about like his right hand and his heart and things, and he says that, again, to be able to say a prayer, then like to say a word, and for it to have a kind of a certain power, you need to be able to say it in a certain way. Again, like you could link that to your three centers. You'd be able to like speak the word with your three centers, and in order for the word to kind of be real, you need to have like, again, a three center kind of understanding of it. So like, again, if I'm reading the words in the tales, then I need the word needs to evoke in me, like, again, mental content as well as like sensations and feeling content.
Yeah, I was about to say that, about making it come alive.
Yeah, so again, you can use it as an exercise in like as you read it and as you ponder the ideas, use it as an exercise to try to bring you could say then your three sides of you together, your mind, your body, and feelings, and also just use it as an opportunity to try to look at how you do understand things. Like look at how do I take the meaning of this word, being or consciousness or I, or maybe he's talking about reason or something. But you just use it as an opportunity to try to think, confront what do I really you know, what do I really have in me, the data and the ideas about this or that, you know, idea. So self-confrontation, you know, trying to use the book to bring up the material that I have in me, to see that material and come to understand it in a new way. So I'd also almost suggest that a lot of like what he kind of intends for you from the book is not to kind of necessarily get a little insight into what he means by this or that analogy or what he's talking about, but almost that he just wants you to use it as like, again, like a means of self-inquiry. You know, use the book to bring the material that you have in you, put it into this book, and then see it in a new light, you know. So again,
it's
people
not
can
just unlock the book, the keys to the book. We also want to use the keys to unlock ourselves.
Exactly, yeah. Yes, like self-knowledge, you know. So a lot of people can look at the book and approach it as if there's like a specific piece of like, there's a specific answer in there. You know, they almost like treating it like a crossword puzzle. So they're just trying to get the specific, you know, they think he has a specific piece of meaning that he's conveying that he wants you to get. People can just go on the hunt for that. And I mean, there are things like that. There are like, you know, hidden, you could say veiled metaphors and things like that. You know, and that's great, you know, to feel as if you're in on the joke, you know, that you get what he's talking about in the reference. But yeah, I think like you say, at the end of the day, he wants you to, you could say, use it just as like almost a means of exercise, you know, means of developing your mentation, like, or coming to see yourself, you know, confronting yourself. You know, you could say, like you say, you use the book and you can get the chance to say, well, I don't know what the hell he's talking about here, you know, so then that gives you the opportunity what you want to do about that, you know, if you want to pursue that, you know.
There's like a crossword that the Oxford English Dictionary is not going to help you with.
Yeah, yeah. And also, I suppose, like, I think if you have a general kind of like religious education, you know, I suppose if you know a bit about different traditions and things, and maybe also a bit about history, it might give you more context for some of the ideas that he's talking about. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think part of his hope was that certain people would come across the book, you know, after he popped his clogs, who had some of this, who'd already had some life experiences and maybe knew a bit about, you know, like say spirituality and things. I think he hoped that that kind of person would come to the book and be able to get more out of it because of the life experience that they were bringing to bear on the book. You know, I think he does say again somewhere that, you know, he's talking to one of the groups, the people around him. He says, you know, there may be people who've never met me, you know, obviously after I'm dead, and who come across the book, and they might understand it better than some of you people who spent years with me, you know. So again, I think he's was hoping for certain people who had something in them, maybe a deeper understanding or deeper level of being just through the life experiences, that they would come to the book, get something out of it, and then be able to take their understanding. Take their understanding and put it back out into the community. Like, again, I think he does talk about like artists and things like that, hoping that they would come across the book and therefore be able to become a kind of cultural influence. Like, he did talk to a lot of like, you know, quite famous writers and things, didn't he? And, you know, like de Hartmann was like, you know, up there, and he was like friends with Kandinsky and stuff. So he was in the mix with those kind of semi-influential people, you know, or in terms of the like writers and, you know, people in creative, you know, endeavors. So I think he was hoping for people like that to come across the book or the groups and use that to be able to then like take what they learn from that, develop their own skill or art, and re-express the work through their own vehicle, you know.
That's quite interesting you bring up about artists, because in the last few years I've been getting to Leonora Carrington and her friend, who now slips my mind. Hold on, I'm just going to have a quick look at the book. Remedios Varas. I've really liked their work for a few years. And then I finally found a biography on them. And blown me, turns out they were in Paris at the same time Gurdjieff was. Carrington says she never met Gurdjieff, but she does write a book about him. The Hearing Trumpet, which I put on my YouTube channel. But when they both, Remedios and Carrington, moved to South America, they got involved with Rodney Collins, and they both had worked with Ouspensky apparently. So, you know, it was really weird that I was brought to these artists with no idea that they were involved in the fourth way, but used to be really intrigued by their art. Some of it I used to think, well, that's a bit like the movements when I saw their paintings. I find out only, you know, last year that they both were involved in groups, but after Gurdjieff had died. I've had the same experiences in a few cases, like, you know, with
writers or musicians or something, like I've come across them for some reason or other and liked their stuff, and then maybe like done a little bit of research about them, their background and stuff, and then lo and behold, like you say, it crops up that they've had some, some connection to their work or something. So again, it's like I suppose it's hard to appreciate how much like those ideas, say from the like Gurdjieff, Steiner, and the people who were around at that time, early 1900s. It's hard to see what influence they've had in the common culture, outside of just the books and stuff that, the formal, explicit productions that are out there for people. But it's hard to see the actual cultural, influence in terms of, people's experience, how they've been affected by those ideas and how those ideas might pass through, unnoticed, like just through a book that somebody writes. And they maybe like not mention Gurdjieff or anything, but the book might be seeped in those ideas,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or the artist. Well, we best get on and do some more questions, or we'll never get these all done. Well, I'm going to change the order. I saw, because we talked about prayer, and Alexander Semenoff was asking, well, he didn't ask, he just put Lord's Prayer, great theme. And the Lord's Prayer is a great theme in the Gurdjieff work. Gurdjieff talks about it, and Ouspensky talks about it. I'm actually going to just quickly say about what Ouspensky said about it, and with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. I hope you all know it by heart. If not, go and learn it immediately. Because he says that there's two ways of looking at it. The way that most people just read it and pray in church, whereas the system, the fourth way system, comes at it with more meaning, an esoteric meaning to it. And that he's saying that when we're using the fourth way, we should be using this prayer, for example, the Lord's Prayer, with our higher centers rather than just our everyday centers. But he talks about the Lord's Prayer, and I'm just going to do a quick little recap and I'll let Josh talk. So he's saying, for example, when we say our Father who art in heaven, we're talking to whatever we think is the divine source. And when we're saying who art in heaven, we should be thinking about what is that heaven. Obviously in the Gurdjieff, Beelzebub's towers, it's the Son Absolute. And he goes on to be, hallowed be thy name. And Ouspensky says that's all to do about having the right attitude to God. When you're saying, hallowed be thy name, it's what is your attitude to God or the divine source? And when he's talking about thy kingdom come, thy will be done, this is the desire for the growth of the esotericism in ourselves. It's the inner part of humanity. When it's thy will be done, it's the transition from earth to heaven. So it's from our lower selves to our higher selves. It's that transition that we're trying to make upwards. And when he's talking about give us this day our daily bread, well, Ouspensky says this should be saying the superstantial bread we should be getting. It's the superstantial higher food. I know many people talk about the manna that's in the Old Testament, and that the manna is the higher food being brought down to us. Well, now we're attaining to try and get up to it and reach up and grab that higher food by working on ourselves. And then we've got our forgive us our trespasses and lead us not in temptation. So obviously it's about forgiving, but forgiving, sincerely ourselves and those that annoy us and whatever. And, this path that we're taking, it is always full of temptation and always full of little tricksters to try and tempt us off the path or knock us off the path. We're going to come up against blockages to, make sure that we're sincere in our travels, isn't it? And deliver us from evil. Ouspensky says when we're asking this, we should be asking, what is evil? Is it evil that we're not working on ourselves, or is it, some other kind of evil? And all this was in the Fourth Way book. I can't remember what chapter offhand. I should have written that down. Not many people read the Fourth Way book by Ouspensky because it is really a Q&A. And I think some people find that difficult, don't they? But what would you have to say about prayer?
I think he does mention in Search of the, I think it's in Search of Miracles. I think he has a little bit on prayer there, like Ouspensky recounting Gurdjieff talking about it. And again, a similar thing to kind of like what you're saying. He says that, that obviously, in general, we're very mechanical. So everything we do is kind of habitual and automatic. So the same applies to prayer. Like, he kind of says the normal way that we kind of pray is just almost like a kind of habitual repetition. Like we might repeat the same kind of prayer, and that usually it's just in the form of like, a petition where we're asking after something. But it's like he says that we always like completely pass the buck over to like God, and like we make our prayer, and we might feel very emotional about whatever the prayer is for. We might feel a need, but it's like, we still just put the prayer out there, and then you could say just pass the buck to God and ask him for help, but we don't really do anything. See what I mean? The prayer is just a passive, like you could say, asking for help. So he says that, again, to maybe possibly get more out of prayer, to make it more effective, we need to change how we pray. So he does he goes, I think I don't think it's very long, it's a couple of paragraphs, but he talks about how, like what you're saying, you need to kind of get in touch with all the ideas and the meaning that you have inside you when you're uttering this or that word in the prayer. You kind of need to get in touch with the reality that the word, the particular word that you're using in the prayer, the reality that it signifies. In which case, again, that's like, it requires quite an intense inner effort to, like you're saying, if you're using the word God, then try to, I'd say, well, what am I addressing by God? What do I understand by God? So again, you're using the prayer as an opportunity to try to get in touch with all the the ideas and thoughts and feelings you have in you to this concept God, so that it's almost using it as a means for a self-inquiry again. You're trying to bring before you what is your understanding of this or that word, or what is its reality for you, the meaning that it has for you. So in that sense, they're kind of like invocations. Like each word that I would say, I'd have to like invoke all that meaning in me. I want to kind of like embrace the totality of each word. And so he says, if you kind of pray in that way, where you're trying to get in touch with what the word really means to you, or everything that you have inside you connected to this or that word, then it's like each word will be a kind of experience. Like again, that's what he says that's what you're after. You want to make these words a kind of a lived experience, rather than something that's just in your head or has a little bit of feeling attached to it. If I can make each word like a real, for myself, kind of lived experience, if I can say each word at the height of its meaning, do you know what I mean? Like you said, kind of say it as honestly, you could say, or as fully as am I able to, then just by virtue of doing that, making that effort to pray in that way, he says it can bring lots of results. You can have new understandings, and doing that can kind of make the prayer effectual, in that you'll get kind of, you could say, from yourself what you are asking from God. Again, how the prayer, it depends what the nature of the prayer is, if you're asking for something specific, but definitely if you talk about understanding and those kind of things, then that way of praying can, just by engaging it, change your understanding. You'll kind of come to the understanding you are after through the prayer, or it'll change your perspective on things. So just again, like trying to use prayer in a three-centered, three-brained way, where like I say, you kind of try to say each word in your three brains together, like feel the word, think the word, and almost bring it into your body. Like what sensations do I have in relation to this or that word? So it becomes
prayer like more for perhaps your essence, or will your personality prayers be answered?
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose it would depend on maybe how beneficial or useful the particular prayer is for you. I mean, like we have, the personality needs to develop just as much as the essence. So there are different things that that could be given to us, or that we could come to through prayer, in either case. But like I suppose essentially it's probably to do more with the essence, rather than the personality. I mean, like we tend to acquire the material of our personality from around us, from the world, and obviously you can acquire certain of these ideas through the external world, in terms of ideas about like how to pray and things. But of course, again, at the end of the day, you have to embody them. You have to bring them into yourself, into inner being. So that kind of takes it beyond the level of personality that's just some external knowledge that you've acquired and use to deal with things outside of yourself. If you're talking about how do I deal with my self, then you could talk about it as essence knowledge. But again, you're only going to gain that through the doing of it. People can give you the ideas, but you have to take them inside yourself. So I guess he talks about prayer as like almost a form of exercise. You could do it not just like as a petition, but as literally as a means to inquire into yourself, and to develop your capacity to bring yourself into different states. Like he talks a lot about when he was a kid, like he says he was lucky, you know, to kind of grow up with where he did and with the parents that he did. And he specifically mentions his father, saying that his father helped him a lot when he was a kid to be able to, he doesn't go into details, but he says that he became able to like bring himself into a certain state, which again, he kind of links to his essence, like an essence state. And that through bringing himself into that state, he was able to, like he says, he uses it to make decisions and things like that in his life, you know, that would be lasting. So people nowadays could almost look at that in terms of like getting yourself into a what do they call it, like hypnagogic, whatever state, you know, a state of suggestion, and then you suggest yourself, self-hypnosis kind of thing, you know. So a similar thing to that, being able to bring yourself into a, you could say, higher state then. So you kind of, prayer is another means of exercising that capacity to, like, again, to fully commit into one, you could say, state, you know. Like you're saying, when you go into the church to pray, you know, you take your shoes off and stuff. So the idea being that you let go of everything else and you'd be able to become, like, you could say, one-minded, single-minded for the time that you're doing the prayer. You don't let anything else, you know, distract you. So just mobilizing the whole of yourself, you know, it gives you one form of, you know, one means of doing that, one form of exercise, you know.
And there's nothing wrong with asking, even sending a little prayer to Mr. Gurdjieff before you read All and Everything, asking him to help you.
Yeah. Again, like, I guess he has his idea about prayer, doesn't he? He says that kind of similar thing to this notion of, like, the stairway or the ladder of progression, that you can only kind of, in a sense, directly pray to the next rung above you, you know, but they might be able to hear your prayer and they will pass it on to the so he almost, you know, talks about it as like passing on a message up and up and up and up the chain of command until it reaches someone who can, you know, do something about it. So in that sense, definitely, you know, you can use that kind of thing, you know, appeal to other beings, or, you know, particularly ones that you have a, you know, like an emotional connection with. You can ask them for help, you know, definitely.
So pray for your souls, peoples, and pray for everybody's souls.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember if Ouspensky mentions it or not, but doesn't he say something somewhere about it being like a breathing exercise? Or I think there's something mentioned somewhere.
Yeah, he does. I didn't look that bit. I've forgotten about that bit. I didn't look that bit up. Because I've got here that he said, he points out that in the Lord's Prayer, there's no I or the word me. And I'd not noticed that before. It's like, yeah, he's right. There is no I or me when you read in the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah, well, it's all like that and us, isn't it? Give us our daily bread. Yeah. But I don't know. I can't remember whether it was Gurdjieff who says this, or maybe it might be somebody else, you know, who was commentating on it. But I think, yeah, somewhere it suggested that some of those, or a lot of those prayers, they were used again, like, as exercises, as inner exercises, and possibly as breathing ones. Like, again, if you're like a lot of the, you know, Orthodox churches and stuff, they sing, don't they? They sing some of the prayers. So again, you could see that there's a kind of a breathing exercise in that. You know, like, it could be handed down, couldn't it? A particular form, a way of singing the prayer, you know, with, you know, particular length of time for each word and maybe a number of breaths to take. There could be a whole systemized thing there that we don't know about. But just again, he opens up another angle to it, that they could be used not just for, like, say, what the idea of, like, we're petitioning something, but literally using it as an exercise, a means of transforming ourselves, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Because in the ancient world, people used to sing and dance to their gods. You know, even David in the Bible went and did a little song and dance to his God when he, can't remember if it was when he slayed Goliath or whatever, but anyway, in reverence to him.
Yeah,
you know, the gods used to like us to sing and dance, and I don't know if there's too much of that going on these days in Western civilization, but, you know, have a song and a dance, even do it when no one's looking.
Yeah, well, I like that idea. Like, you could look at, like, what we were saying about the book, you know, trying to find different ways to ponder the ideas in the book. The same with prayer. You can find a whole range of different ways to pray. They don't have to just look like the stereotypical thing of sitting there, you know, with your palms together or whatever. Like, you could do a dance, you could, whatever, paint a picture. Any of that could serve for prayer, because, like, it's the nature of the activity that you're getting into. It doesn't really matter its external, you know, its external expression. But yeah, like you're saying, don't they? They say that the gods required man to, like, worship and celebrate, you know, the festivals and things. So again, that does suggest that we were required to do those kind of things, in the sense of, like, making occasions, you know, like in one sense, what is prayer? It's a ritual, isn't it? Like, again, it might be more formal. You might have a specific set routine that you do every time you pray. Like maybe you go to the same room and you light a candle, or so you can create formal rituals where that's like
But doesn't that become a bit mechanical, and then maybe you're losing the imprint or the, it's not. You get into a routine. Maybe the gods like to be surprised. Maybe they want
well, I'm just saying. Yeah, I'm just saying you could do it anyway. I'm saying prayer could look anything from a very regimented, repeated thing to something, never the same. But I mean, either way, their means for doing something intentionally, like you're taking a moment out from your normal day and you're doing something that has nothing to do with your daily requirements. Like I don't need to pray to, go and work and get my money to live, and so you're taking a moment out from that to do something you could say that's like supposed to be completely of your own volition, completely intentional. So that's what I mean by like the gods leading us to worship, taking moments where we do things that, at least to us seem to have nothing to do with like needs. It's not motivated by our normal like bodily needs. So just that idea that maybe they need us to do things intentionally, to take moments out where we do something intentionally. It could be anything, but just the energy that's kind of produced from that is maybe what they feed off,
And the other thing with prayer is you could maybe just like look upon a certain symbol like the Enneagram, because that's Alexander's next question. Isn't it time to continue the book Intelligent Enneagram? I didn't write a book Intelligent Enneagram, did you?
Well, Tony Blake, it's his book, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Well, I just thought, that's something you can, it's like a prayer, isn't it? You can meditate on these kind of symbols and work with them that way. Yeah.
And I think in the book there is an Enneagram where he does one on the prayer. I think he does one on the Lord's Prayer. Like puts that.
Yes, round it. Yes, I've forgotten all about that. I should have brought that in as well. Yes.
So people could have a look at that, I suppose. But yeah, I found it a good book on the Enneagram just because it's so broad, like he talks about films and science. It's just different ways that you could look at the Enneagram. But definitely what you said, a symbol, that can be a form of prayer, like contemplating it. But again, trying to bring your whole being into it, not just in a mental way, but also emotional and some kind of physical aspect too.
Well, Tony, you need to continue with the Intelligent Enneagram. Maybe I'll have to grab Tony for a show and do that. But I did want to just say we've got to remember that the Enneagram works when it's moving. It's not a static symbol.
Yeah. Again, same thing. I think you need to find different ways of working with it to try and understand it. Again, like the movements. Like he does mention that one of the best ways to understand the Enneagram is to participate in the movements, because you're kind of being exposed to those ideas in a completely different way, not a non-verbal or not non-mental way. In a way, you're just exposed to them in your body, so it gives it another angle, another way in to kind of understand.
Right, I'm going to go on to another question now. This is from Damage Inc. Did Ouspensky think there was a way of escaping eternal return? And I wanted to just say that we've got to remember that Ouspensky kept stating that eternal return, the recurrence theory, is a theory. He states this lots when people are asking him questions about it. It's a theory. Nobody knows what's going to happen when we die, whether we reincarnate, whether we have the recurrence. I don't know if people know, it's the same as the Nietzsche idea of when we die, go back to the beginning of this life and start living this life again. So it's like as if we're repeating this life, but maybe that's the test of trying to improve ourselves every time. And I just wanted to say that he said it was very important about A, B, and C influences, and they can help affect your eternal return, or whether you return or not. I just wondered if you could quickly tell us about what are the A, B, and C influences, because I often get these mixed up.
Oh, well, yeah, it's probably been a while since I've read In Search of the Miraculous, so I'll struggle to give you the exact formal definition. But like C influence then is, like he kind of talks about it basically as like an undiluted conscious influence, an influence that was conscious in its origin and has managed to kind of remain pure until you receive it in whatever form you receive it. But again, the idea that it's a kind of undistorted influence. And I think he mainly talks about that C influence in terms of saying, well, you'd have to be in contact with, like, you could say, like a school or somebody. So they tend to talk about it in kind of like a direct influence, like maybe you meet a teacher or you come across a school. So it's usually like a living embodied influence rather than, I don't think he talks about it much in terms of like books and things, but I still think that there's a potential there. I think you can meet see influence or conscious influence in anything, you know. So I don't think it just has to be in the example of meeting a living teacher or a living, you know, school. I mean, you could have higher experiences, which you could class as a see influence, a higher insight, or, you know, something like that. So just the idea that it's conscious in its origin, this influence, and it's kind of remains undistorted when you receive it. And it's like be influence would be like a step down from that. It's like something that was, you could say, was conscious in its origin. There was, you know, a higher level of information to it. But through the process of you receiving it, whatever the medium or the media was that you've received it through, has slightly distorted it. You know, like again, it could be like something like a book. Maybe a guy has a higher experience, something to do with the see influence, tries to communicate that in a book, but obviously there could be limitations then by the very nature of the book and the medium, that someone's not going to get the direct influence through the book necessarily. I still think it's possible, but en masse, you're going to get like a B influence, you know, from a book or some kind of intermediary, you know, means of accessing or engaging with that influence. And A influence is like the complete opposite. It's like, you know, you could look at it in terms of a C influence that entered, you know, the realm of life and was got so degenerated that it like became its opposite, you know. So I suppose he kind of says that the normal religion, like the form of the religion that we meet, it's kind of like that. It's kind of like the A influence version of it. It's religion as it's become through time, through the influence of like people's misunderstanding and personality. So that's the kind of version of the religion that we get. Again, you could look at it in terms of like exoteric, mesoteric, and esoteric. You know, the A influence could be the exoteric version of the religion that we're generally exposed to in culture. B influence would probably be like maybe you start to come across some of the kind of esoteric books that give you a little bit of an insight that there could be another side of this religion there, rather than just the formal, literal story that you've been given. And then the C influence would be like, yeah, the true exoteric, esoteric side of the religion, you know.
So I think when Ouspensky is saying about eternal recurrence is affected by these three influences, depending on which you get involved. Say you got involved with lucky enough to get involved with a C influence, then your chance of coming back on getting caught up in the eternal return is less, or maybe you'd come back but be a bit more developed, ready to go on to the next stage. But if you get caught up in the A influence, then you're just going to come back and repeat, do it all mechanically all again.
Yeah, and like you're saying, so I suppose if the C is the conscious influence, then I suppose like, consciousness in that sense would be linked to creativity and evolution and like wisdom and intelligence. So that would be what could change, you know, be able for change. And then like you're saying, the A influence would just be like, the completely kind of mechanical and like self-perpetuating in the same kind of, you know, form. So like again, they correspond to different like you could say different levels in yourself, different sides of our being, you know. Like I guess you would say that there's the talk of the law of accident and the law of like fate and the law of will. And I think again they're in Search for Miraculous. And again, he says there are different kinds of laws that us human beings can be under. And in order, like he says, generally we're just under as we're born, we're just under the influence of accident. And that's kind of like the personality. When our personality is the most dominant player in our being, then we're just determined by all the influences that we've happened to pick up in our given cultural situation and the people that we've met, you know. So it's kind of fairly accidental in its nature in terms of the particular ideas that we come across and how they will then reflect in our behavior. And the law of fate would be when essence becomes more active than personality. The essence is like linked to what you come in with, what you kind of, you know, something of you that's kind of pre-incarnation that you're born with. So if that becomes the more kind of dominant player in your being, then you'll come under the law of fate, you know. So that will be like a fate that corresponds to your particular essence type. And then again, will would be a step further than that, where you could go beyond kind of the individual essence, the particular type that you were given, you know. So you could, if you could develop your essence type, then you could get beyond the fate that's kind of associated with it. So in the first sense, in the law of accident, it would be like, there's nothing can be done, you know, it's completely accidental. Maybe you might meet some influence or not, but it's likely that it's just going to perpetuate itself. So it'd be like eternal recurrence, but with minimal change between each incarnation, each version of it. There'll be some things that be different, but there'd just be differences on the kind of external circumstances and things like that. There won't be a difference, you could say, in your inner being. Whereas if you had kind of reached your fate, then I think that would be the means that would provide a bit of the possibility of change, because you've reached the level of your essence, which is the part of you that is what would be subject to eternal recurrence anyway, because you kind of leave your personality supposedly when you die. So it'd be the essence that kind of reincarnated anyway. But if you're more in touch with that, then like you say, maybe each time you reincarnate, or each version of it, your essence becomes a little bit more developed. So that means that you're able to get more out of the life situations that you experience. And so again, that could lead to a development over time in terms of each recurrence. But yeah, it'd only be the law of will that would probably like maybe free you from that altogether, because
finding this kind of work will help you hopefully get to the B and C influences and away from the A influences, if you work with yourself or on yourself on these kind of teachings.
Yeah, and it's funny because like with the eternal recurrence, like it's almost suggested that those other versions, that they're all happening now. They're kind of simultaneous. It's more like parallel timelines. Like there's a version of you where you live the life in this particular way, and that particular there's a particular end to that life, and it's like all those different versions are running parallel. So in that sense, it wouldn't be like each recurrence is not existing in linear time. Like you go through one and then life, and then you go back to the start and live it again. I think it'd be more like all those different possibilities are like parallel lines, like the life where you don't achieve any change, right up to the opposite end of the spectrum where you realize everything or achieve the full transformation that's possible to you. So I think they're like parallel lines, and you can shift. You know what I mean? You can jump, and if you attain some real development in life, like going against the habits or something significant, then that would be like you jump in kind of timelines. Do you see what I mean? So I think that's one side of it. And I think coincidence, or not coincidence, deja vu, is it? A lot of people have those experiences, and there is some suggestion in that experience that you've been, like you say, like you've been here before, like this event, has panned out before. So you could say that, again, that's kind of suggesting that there's a side of your consciousness that is not subject to the repeated life, the life situation, but is kind of disembodied from it. And depending on how much it wakes up to, you could say its situation, that'll depend how much it can transform it, So like in order to get out of eternal recurrence, it would suggest that you need to gain some awareness that that's a situation. It's like you'd have to have some kind of experiences literally like that suggested to you that you'd been here before, or some insights into the kind of the fate that's going to befall you if you just carry on in the way that you are. You know what I mean? Like I think in order to change at the level of eternal recurrence, it'd have to represent some kind of big expansion of your consciousness, so that you were able to see that, that you had all these multiple kind of lives and different versions, because normally our consciousness, we're just tied to the moment, like this moment and then the next moment. So we're tied into the particular stream of time, we can't get like out of it to get a bigger glimpse, So again, in the terminology of the work, I think that getting out of the eternal recurrence would be like what Gurdjieff talks about, the Kesdje body, and Maurice Nicoll talks about it as a time body, for that reason, that it's something that doesn't just exist in linear time, in the limited moment. So you can get access to, like, then you could say, things that are eternal in nature, non-linear, And in the book, it's the Kesdje body that you use to go to purgatory, So that purgatory could be that place again where those transformations could take place. Again, that doesn't have to be after life. I think what he means by like the two Raskowanos, the two deaths, I think he's really talking about them as transformations that can occur in life. Can. I mean, it's probably rare, and it's possible to happen after death, but I think he means it in life.
It was probably the deeper meaning to Christ's talk about being reborn.
Yeah, Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because like you said, then to get out of the eternal recurrence, you're going to have to be kind of like born into that realm, and the realm that's able to deal with the, that's able to act outside of time.
Right, so everybody, to avoid the eternal recurrence, we've just got to work on ourselves. And, if we come back next time, then hopefully we'll be drawn back to this work because we've been working on ourselves, and we'll be that little bit more ready for it, a bit more prepared and understand it some more next time.
Yeah, I think that what Gurdjieff calls conscience, that's he says is buried in our subconsciousness. I think that conscience is that kind of, that part of us that is eternal then, you see what I mean? So it's like that side of your consciousness has access, you could say, to that knowledge, like the knowledge that's been, say, acquired over all these reiterations of the same life. Your consciousness has like been through that, So if we can start to tap into that kind of side of ourselves, then I think it can bring us knowledge that's been gathered through all these like different incarnations. Or there's that idea that I think in some like esoteric things, it's like what you're living through now is that moment of death when life flashes before your eyes. So it's like in a way you're on your deathbed, but you're reliving your whole life in the blink of an eye, and so like your conscience is like reevaluating that. So it's like somehow if you could connect to your conscience now in this moment, it's like it's trying to give you messages to reconcile the things that you need to reconcile before you die.
Exactly, yes. And the great writer Terry Pratchett said himself, everybody relives their life before death. It's called living, or everybody sees their life go before death.
Yeah,
it's called living. So live our lives, live. Enjoy your life.
Yeah, I do think there's something weird going on in our nature. I think we do have a part of us that's like that. It's like you could say it's ahead in time, in the future, if you like, or it knows what's going to happen, or it's just outside of linear time. So again, if we can start to try to get in touch with what he calls the conscience in ourselves, I think that is what can guide us that way, because it can have these insights that are, that have been gleaned outside of the linear time. So yeah, any effort. I mean, Gurdjieff makes the classic thing, like he talks about remorse of conscience, trying to remember like moments in our lives, then let's say then when we've acted in ways that we saw to be bad or harmful to ourselves or others, trying to intentionally remember those moments and like feel the full force of them, like the unpleasantness, the suffering, so that we can then use that as a possible reminding factor to change how we act in the future. Like in his thing with like remembering yourself, it's like you're trying to create these connections between the different moments of your life, so that like an experience you had as a kid, maybe where you learned something valuable, that you can remember that in this moment, that you can bring the fruits of, collect all the valuable moments that you've experienced and bring them together in the moment so that you can act from it. So I think that's very much your self-remembering. That's kind of like an action that takes you outside of linear time. It's like you're trying to connect to the part of you that's holding all those experiences that you've had. It's kind of like the subconscious. I think it kind of lives in every moment of experience that we've had perpetually. It's like for the subconsciousness, it's present in every moment of your life that you've ever experienced. But now it's like the subconscious doesn't have a memory. It's literally present in all of those moments. It's kind of like what Ouspensky says about self-remembering. He says why you can remember. He says almost the only moments that you can truly remember, like with a real vividity, are moments when you were remembering yourself, when you were more aware. And if you go to one of those memories, they do have that kind of taste to them, as if it hasn't aged, and you're connecting with it in a way that feels much more real than just a memory. It's like you can actually see that moment is kind of like still there. So again, that subconscious side of you would be what is kind of like, the eternal side of you, that would have access to all those moments of experience in various timelines and could possibly change or evolve.
Well, I'm going to take us round now to Moti Shabbat. I hope I've said that right, Moti Shabbat, because I thought this would go on well with what we was just talking about. Moti says, I'd love to hear about practical ways on how to equilibrium the three centers, and how or if one can work on himself without a school. Some tips on how to do this. Also, if you share some exercises, how in your busy daily routine we can practice in life the work. And I'd just like to say that I start every day with the Gurdjieff sitting.
Mm.
You know, when you sit and you do the I am exercise, you know, the breathing in, because that is a great way of starting the day and going through your body. You know, it doesn't have to take long. It's a great way of settling yourself down, ready for whatever's coming that day.
Yeah.
And that's the first exercise I always do. I find it difficult to always remember myself throughout the day. And I know Gurdjieff tells us to try and remember ourselves, you know, pick an hour and do it. Even that I find difficult to do. I always get caught out, or I'm not got very good timing, and suddenly realize, oh, I was supposed to do that, you know, last hour. You know, so don't punish yourselves for not doing these exercises, but do try and implement them into your lives, or implement them, I should say, into your lives. And to equilibrium, the free centers, well, that's all part of the work. That's what we're doing, trying to do with this work. So I'm going to hand that question back over to you now, Josh.
Well, I think, you know, if you've came across some of the material of the work, like something like, say, In Search of the Miraculous, which is, you know, like an introduction to the, you know, the gist, some of the basic ideas. I think if you have something like that, if you've got a basic, you could say, understanding, you know, of the work, like the nature of man as having these different centers, then hopefully that should provide you with a kind of an understanding of the gist or the spirit, in the sense that then you can go and find your own ways of exercising. Like, it's like you can come up with your own exercises if you understand the basic principles that he's outlining in terms of what you need to do, or the way, you know, ways to exercise your three brains. And there's loads of different ways you can do that. So hopefully that, like, if you get some basic understanding of what he's talking about, that will enable you then to go and, you know, create your own kind of exercises or explore it. Because obviously there's loads of different ways that you could work on each brain individually, different ways I could work on my mind or my feelings or my body. And then obviously there's a whole load of ways that you could do different things that combined them in different, you know, different actions that combine them. But again, in general, like the stalwarts of his teaching are kind of like, one, work with your body. So he kind of advises that, you know, like you were saying, maybe at least once, you know, during your day, you set aside a moment to intentionally make contact with your body. Like, again, one of those exercises you could use, or you could do anything, but just a way that you become aware of your physical body, like he talks about in terms of sensing and sensation. So yeah, at least having one moment during the day where you just focus on your body and develop you kind of the subtlety of your awareness of your body. How much of my body can I bring to my awareness? Can I develop, you know, my own awareness of my body? I mean, of course, in general, we just take it for granted. You know, yeah, I'm aware of my body, you know, but we don't explore that idea that it's possible to develop that. Or it's just, some people could just see it as a crazy suggestion. Well, yeah, just sense your toe. You know, what the F's the point in that, you know? But, you know, according to him, and if you try it, you can reveal, you know, you can have interesting experiences, and through exercising it, you can develop the kind of contact that you have with your body during a life. And again, that can have various, you know, beneficial results. So I would say one thing you do, set aside a moment during the day where you just put all your attention into your body and try to become more aware of it. And you could also like try to relax it, you know, try to infuse the body with like some sense of a positive quality, like, you know, relaxation or vitality.
Because that's one of Gurdjieff's interesting exercises I've been trying to do these last few months, and is the one where you can lie down. He does advise lying down for that, when you try and relax everything from head to toe.
Yeah.
You know, relax your eyebrows and the back of your head and behind your eyeballs and things. It took a while to get doing that, because I'd suddenly be distracted by something, and then it's like, oh, I've got to start again.
Yeah, it's a good one. Like you say, it's even just exercising your attention, but also like you can have, you know, interesting experiences, like, you know, that can come from that. And so that you can set aside a period of the day where you try to be aware of your body, you know, like as much as you can. But also, obviously, throughout the day, whenever you notice yourself, remember yourself in some form, the idea comes to you, you can make the effort to try to be more aware of your body, you know, just passively, or like the breath's a big one. Like you did say, you know, just try to be aware of your breath as you go about your business. So, like, you know, if you're particularly busy, you know, in your average day, then yeah, it might be unlikely that you'll remember to do that. but usually in the course of a day there are moments when maybe you're washing the dishes or something, so there's some time where you're not under too many demands, that you can do something with your, you know, your inner attention. Like washing the dishes would be a classic one. Like while I'm doing that, maybe I just make the effort to sense my hands or sense my feet, you know, be aware of my body and my breath as I'm doing that. So that's one, like a whole host of ways you can be aware of your body. And also, like with these movements, that's like an active form of bodily meditation. Like you're doing kind of complicated movements, you know, that have a set form with your body, whilst you're also trying to be aware of yourself and like do different things with your attention, you know. So if you can find an active way of working out your body that you use as another exercise to be aware of it, like Tai Chi or something, or just, you know, whatever, just you could just stand in your room and you could take different gestures and you can just try to be aware of your body as you do that. So active and passive work with your body in terms of being aware of it, maybe just passive sitting down, being aware of it, or trying to find a way to increase my awareness of it whilst I'm moving, you know, movement. They're two big, you know, kinds of exercise. And like the other one with the mind, like finding different ways to exercise your mind, like whether that's pondering on ideas or like using specific like visualization exercises. Like, I suppose if you take the example with washing the dishes, again, normally when I'm washing the dishes, my mind could be going anywhere. You know, maybe it's thinking about something I've got to do next, like, oh, I've got to put the dinner on, or maybe it's just in a memory about something that happened the other day or whatever. It could be just, you know, fairly random in what it's occupied with. But again, if I decide to, I can make the effort to say, right, well, at least for the time that I'm doing the dishes, I'm only going to think about doing the dishes, in the sense that I can look at what's before me, whether it's like plates or the water or the taps, and I can look at something and I can choose to ponder on it. Like say, look at the plate and try to go into like its history, like where has this plate come from? How has all the transformations of its matter gone through to become a plate? So in that sense, you're just using them, you know, whatever physical activity you're doing as like an excuse to exercise your mind in terms of its associations. You're confining its associations to a particular topic, and again, like allowing the stuff to come up. So again, there's all sorts of different ways that you can exercise your mind that way, in terms of like different ideas or complicated like visualization exercises you can do, like trying to hold complicated shapes or pictures in your mind and then like rotate them and things like that. Or like, you know, he gave various counting exercises at Fontainebleau. So like different kinds of mental exercise, different kinds of like active and passive body exercise. And then also like some kind of work in your emotions, in the sense of like spending time. Again, you could take a moment out from the day where you'll sit down and you just put your attention into your emotions, and maybe you choose a particular emotion that you want to, you could say, work with, or that you want to be in or explore. Like it could be like a feeling of, you know, intimacy, or it could be, you know, feeling of love or happiness or sorrow or grief. You know, you just take the moment to explore that emotion and like allow it to arise at you, or intentionally try to foster it. So you, in that sense, you're like working out your intentional capacity to use your emotions intentionally. Like, I mean, again, in our normal life, that our emotions are mostly just at the play of what happens around us. You know, we don't really, you know, except for instances where we have to not express our negative emotions because something's, you know, going on and it wouldn't be, you know, appropriate, then we rarely do anything intentional with our emotions, you know, because I think there is that attitude in modern society that any like tampering work with your emotions is regarded as like inauthentic, you know, because we tend to take our automatic emotional reactions as being authentic, isn't it? You know, so anything trying to work with them can be seen as like phony. So I think that's a big thing. If you can do work to develop your capacity, like what we were saying before, to bring yourself into a certain emotional state, you know, like say if I've got to go and do something that's going to be stressful and I know that beforehand, then obviously the main thing that stress affects, you could say, is your emotions. That's how it, you know, it can damage you and damage your body and stuff. So, but if I'm able to beforehand, like charge myself up with like a positive emotion, then again, you can kind of use that as like an armor to deal with the situation, you know.
As my friend's been saying to me all last week when I was away, raise the vibration.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like what you were saying with that exercise, I think you were talking about the breathing one, like with the I and the am. Yeah. Well, I think that's a classic.
I am. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a brilliant one for that thing. Like you can literally like, you know, raise your state, raise your vibration, you know, or like Gurdjieff talks about in like in terms of transforming or liberating a higher energy. But you can do that, and it will, like you said, it can set you up for your day. It can have, you know, practical, you know, it can give you practical results in terms of how you're able to navigate your day. You know, like if you start doing it, maybe you'll notice it. Maybe I'm not getting as, you know, stressed in situations that I was, or maybe I feel I've got more energy, or I just feel more, you know, clear-headed. So there's loads of different ways that you could exercise the different centers. But in terms of bringing balance, then to the three, then I suppose you need exercises that engage the three at the same time. Like in Life is Real, Gurdjieff gives that exercise with your three fingers, you know, any three fingers of one hand, where you try and like sense one, feel one, and then with the third, you kind of do like some sort of movement with the counting, whether it's random or like, you know, in a certain pattern. So you're trying to like split your attention to three and actively, you know, be engaged in each one at the same time, you know, actively.
Never been able to do that one.
Oh, he says himself it's the hardest one out of all the, I think out of all the basic exercises he gave, and yet he says that I'm giving it to you to start with because that was in the context of the Araj group, you know. He says that you're in such a dire straits that you need it. Like you've so misunderstood what I meant by like self-observation and self-remembering that you're going to be a candidate for the madhouse. So you need this kind of exercise to begin with, that to, you know, compensate. But I agree with you, it's one of the hardest ones. But it was a big thing for him in terms of what he really meant by self-remembering, like in terms of something, you've got a three-centered attention. It's kind of like you've got an active attention in each of your three centers that's, you could say, free. You know, it's able to act intentionally without being, you know, distracted. So that would be a great exercise to do. But also you can find loads of other ways just to like divide your attention. Like I say, he gives you the basic principle in that exercise. Just split your attention into three parts. One part that's in sensation, one part that's in feeling, and one part that's like in the mind, you know, and trying to be actively involved in each of them at the same time. So I could, again, another form of that exercise, I could pick some image in my mind. It could be like a sacred image or a sacred symbol. And I hold that in my mind and I try to, you know, make it clear and keep my mental attention on it. And at the same time, I could be doing some rhythmic movement with part of my body. And again, trying to sense that and keep that going at the same time as I'm visualizing. And then I could try to, again, intentionally evoke or sustain a particular feeling, you know, a particular emotional attitude, you know. So any...
Cool. But you can do it. We can do it, peoples.
Yeah. So you can find all sorts of any way you can find to like divide your attention, and particularly dividing it into those three at the same time. And finding different ways to do that. I think there's loads of ways you can do it.
Well, that was all our questions for this session. So I'd like to thank you very much, Josh, and remind everyone of your Tapestry of Beelzebub's website, please.
Yep, just on the the WordPress website, and it's just the Tapestry of Beelzebub's Tales, Gurdjieff, and the work, so they can find it if they want.
And I'm www.debbie-elliott.co.uk. I'd like to thank everyone for their questions, and I know there was a couple of others, but they weren't on the community page, so I forgot to write them down. So I do apologise, but next time we do it, I'll try and direct everyone to put it on the community page, and then that way I'll get them all together. But thank you everybody for listening, and until next time, let's all work on ourselves and not get stuck in the next eternal recurrence. Or maybe we can help each other for the next eternal recurrence. So thank you very much, Josh.
All right, thank you, Debbie. Okay.
Until next time, peoples, thank you for watching.